Today the dreams will be all made. Cause I'm having a wonderful day. Hey, hey. I'm having a wonderful day. That's why I live is a blessing for me. Today the dreams will be all made. Cause I'm having a wonderful day. Hey, hey. Welcome, family, to Peep Game TV and Keeping It Real team collaboration. All right, today we probably gonna do a half hour, maybe an hour. Jay Sean has a meeting that he had to attend, so he couldn't make it tonight. And you know, I wanted to make sure that I come and fill in and do what we normally do, even if I had to do it solo. And by the way, I hope you're having a wonderful day. It's 22nd of August on a Friday. We know you could have been anywhere, but we're thankful that you're here with us. Now, I haven't done it solo in a while, so bear with me. I'm getting my feel here, but I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be alive. I'm happy to be in front of you guys. I mean, right now, you guys are like my family, and yeah, I used blackout, so just blacked it out. Just felt like doing something different. You ever just feel like doing something different, you know, and you do it. That's just what it is. So what I'm gonna do, the questions that I was gonna, you know, give to Jay Sean, I'm gonna give them to myself, and then I'm gonna answer it. All right. So let's get to it. Now, the question is, do you think that texting has interfered with the development of healthy communication? Now, the question is, do you think that texting has interfered with healthy communication? It's a question. Now, my answer to that is yes, I do think that texting has interfered with healthy communication. Let me tell you why. Because when you're texting, a person normally can't see your facial expression. They normally don't hear what you're saying when you're texting, and they can draw their own conclusions. Even though when you're having a conversation with someone, people can draw their own conclusions. However, I think it has caused the unhealthy communication because people rather text now than pick up the phone and call. And we are experiencing the aftermath of that, the aftermath of choosing to text somebody rather than to reach out and call them. This is something that we're dealing with. Although texting may seem easier, may be more convenient, and at certain times, I think it's fine. I think at certain times, texting is cool. However, when you really want to get your point across and you really want to get a person to kind of feel what you're saying or comprehend what you're saying, I think it's better to pick up the phone. Me, I started now to pick up the phone and, more so to speak to, especially, my daughters, because it's like texting, okay, if you're at work, it's fine. If you're busy, it's fine. But we're getting to a point where it's affecting us in our everyday life because we can be sitting in a room with someone and we're texting rather than conversating. And the worst part about it is, if you're a certain age, you probably know how to communicate fairly well, even if it's not in a healthy way. However, if you're a youngster and you haven't even developed good communication skills, what do you think that's doing to our young people when it comes to communicating? What do you think that does to them when it comes to handling um, conflict resolution? When you get into a conflict with someone, you can't text them to try to resolve the conflict. You need to be able to speak to them in a manner that can lower their anxiety so that the conversation, don't go somewhere where you don't want it to go. Now, if you're used to texting, that's going to be kind of difficult for you. So, for those of you who just came, the question is, do you think that texting is interfered with the development of healthy communication skills? That's the question. And I think it has, com- you know, interfered with healthy communication skills because a lot of people are not communicating verbally. A lot of people are actually lack of, they're texting. And when you're texting, a lot of times you're using slang, using what you call those, short versions of words, and you're not getting a clear comprehension of what each other is trying to bring across. And as I was saying, the most devastating part about it is our young people are suffering, and then it affects how we establish relationships with each other. How do we establish relationships if we are unable to communicate with the proper skills or healthy skills? I think it's something we need to think about, and it's something that we may need to start working on. Especially if you're sitting at home and you have a thought about a person and you just want to see how they're doing. Try picking up the phone. Hey, what's up? How you doing today? Because growing up, depression and mental illness wasn't as prevalent as it is now. And I think some of that is due to the lack of communication, the lack of being able to communicate in a healthy way, the lack of even being willing to or able to express what you feel. How do you really express your feelings in a text? When you text somebody, what you put a little sign or a laughing emoji or something like that, or a sad face. That's not the same as, you know, calling someone and they can hear the tone of your voice and they can tell whether you're sad or you're in pain. I think that is something that we need to think about. We need to kind of see what it is that we can do so that we can kind of adjust it, work on it to a certain degree, work on it to a better level of being able to communicate in a proper way. What are your thoughts? What do you guys think? I'm open. Type something in. Let me know what you think. Do you think texting is interfering with the healthy development? Healthy development of communication skills. Do you think that texting is doing that? I want to hear what you guys have to say. Now, as I said, Jay Sean wasn't able to make it today because he had an important meeting that came up at the last minute that he had to attend. So rather than not do the show, I wanted to come on and do the show. So the questions that I would have asked Jay Sean, I'm here doing them myself. Okay, so like I said, and I'm not going to do the whole hour because I'm not used to doing the whole hour just solo, just shooting the breeze. I like to be prepared, and I really wasn't prepared for a whole hour. But because I love you guys and I appreciate you guys for coming and spending time with us, I'm going to at least give it a half hour, 45 minutes maybe. So if no one else has anything to say, um, let's go to the next question then. Let's go to the next question. What are your thoughts about slavery being a choice, like Kanye West said? Now, what are your thoughts about slavery being a choice? Remember, some time ago, Kanye West said that slavery was a choice, and people jumped all over him. People started saying he was crazy, he needed to be on his meds, and things of that nature. Now, what actually is slavery? What is it? A person working for free, or is it a person being forced to do work for someone else, or is it a person or people that's being controlled by other people? Now, I personally don't believe that slavery happened the way that we saw it on Roots, the way it was presented to us on Roots. I don't think it happened that way. I think it occurred starting in the 1800s because, many times we say that slavery, we were slaves for 400 years. And how can we be slaves for 400 years in America when America itself is not even 400 years old? So that is a myth. That is something that just been passed down generation to generation just to say we've been slaves for 400 years. Now, what I do think happened is in 1870, after we were naturalized as blacks and supposedly we were made citizens, which put us under the political control of America in the United States. I think that the political control that has been overlapping us by the United States government is the true slavery for us. And the game is, like my show, Peep Game. Now, the game is to make us believe that we were being beat, whipped, sold, and things of that nature, so that we don't recognize that we're being placed in a slavery type situation now. Let's look at it. Everything that we spend money on, the majority of the things, let's say light bill, water bill, mortgages, food, all of these things, we go to who? It's not like people of, and this is not to be racist or anything like that. You know, it's not to be racist or anything to that nature. It's about putting something in a perspective where we can at least look at it differently, from a different perspective. That's what it's about, being able to look at something from a different perspective. And as I was saying, if you're from the South, if you even have a car, even if you paid it off, it's still you still have to pay the state to have your car. You have to pay property taxes. So who came up with this, and how come we are being basically forced, and how are we being forced to do it? By laws. We're being forced to do it based on laws and based on punishment of those laws being enforced. If those laws were done differently, how about if we, those of us whom are of color, were able to have our own DMVs, have our own banks, have our own electrical companies. Like, who owned electrical companies? How come now we have to pay for lights? There was a time, so I was told, that we didn't have to pay for lights. We didn't have to pay for electricity. And I do know there was a time where we didn't have to pay for insurance to drive around. So these are laws that were put in motion that does what? That causes us to have to work to pay bills, to survive, you know? And as I said, to me, and this is only my point of view, I think that we have a misconception about what slavery really is. It could be a servant. If you're serving someone willingly, does that make you a slave? If you're being forced to do something, does that make you a slave? Because if you got to pay bills, are you choosing to work or are you being forced to work based on the bills that you have to pay, based on keeping a roof over your head, based on putting food in your mouth? Are you being forced? Is that a force? Are people who choose to be homeless and don't want to pay anything, are these people free? Or are they, or what? It's something to think about. Now, uh, there was another question that I wanted to go over from last week with Jay Sean, I think it was. Uh, with your one sided view of love and relationship, do you think you should really be doing a relationship? This was for Jay Sean. Now, that one, he has to answer that because I don't know what his answer would be when it comes to that. Okay. Now, the other question is a question that I think it's, what are your thoughts of if you give a person a fish, they eat for a day. If you teach a person how to fish, they eat for a lifetime. Now, my thoughts on that saying, because haven't you guys heard, like, if you give a person a fish, they eat for a day. If you teach them how to fish, they eat for a lifetime. I believe that there's some relevance to um, that saying. I believe there's some relevance. I believe that if you teach a person how to take care of themselves or how to feed themselves, how to be responsible, then if you teach them how to be responsible, then they will be able to take care of themselves. However, if you don't teach them, and this goes out to us as parents, if we teach our children to be responsible, that allows us some type of freedom. That allows us not having to do so many things for them, especially when they get of an age where they're capable of doing, where we would hope they were capable of doing those things themselves, you know? So that's the thing about, if you teach a person how to fish rather than give a person a fish, it's more beneficial. So it's for us as parents and as older siblings, older cousins, teachers, just in general, teaching younger people and some people that may be our own age, being responsibility to be able to do as much as you can for yourself without having to rely on others for things that you're capable of doing yourself. I think that is extremely important for us to be able to do. I believe the more that we can do for ourselves, the more independent we become, uh, you know? And for us as, as individuals, how many of you uh, pride yourself to being able to do things for yourself, doing everything you can for yourself? Now, don't get me wrong. We all need help at times in our lives. We all need somebody. There's, if there was, everyone was meant to be alone, then it would have only been one person. According to the scripture, Adam would have never got Eve and so forth and so on. So we all need someone. It's just a point of it's just a point of being in a position or learning what we are capable of doing that will allow us to need people less. I mean, how many of you have people or family members that consistently need need your help? And how do you feel about these individuals who consistently need help, consistently need you to do something for them? How do you feel about them? Do when you see them calling your phone, do you rush to answer it? Or do you let it ring and let it go to voicemail? That's my point. My point is, if you are capable of doing things yourself, the more you can do for yourself. Like, I mean, we all get into, as I said, we all get into some hardships. We all go through struggles, but we do it in a manner, for those of us who are independent, who like and enjoy being independent. There's a freedom about that. There's a nostalgia about being independent, not having to depend on anyone for the majority of the things that you need. That's why people work. People work for what? So that they can have their own money to do their own things. Now, what happens with the people who work, who spend their money on what they want, but then they ask other people to give them money for what they need? How many of you know people like that? Or, and if you don't know nobody like that, then you might be that person. And if you are that person, then my suggestion is, work on being more mindful with what you do with your finances, with your money. Be more mindful of what you do. Don't don't spend money on some name brand objects, purse, sneakers, hat, jacket, whatever. And at the end of the day, you short for paying your light bill, or you short for paying your mortgage or your rent. You know, What sense does that make? And then you are forced to ask someone else for help. And don't get me wrong, if you can afford those things and it doesn't cause you any financial hardship, by all means, shop up, shop till you drop. However, if it causes you some financial hardship, then my advice is be mindful how you spend your money. Be mindful of who you bring in your presence that you spend your everyday time with. There's a saying that how you want to be shows by who you surround yourself. Who you want to be shows by who you surround yourself with. So basically, whatever you want and how you want to be, there are people that are examples to show you how to get to where you want to be and how you need to do what it is that you're striving to do. There's nothing on earth that there's not someone else that does it or know how to do it. Now, reaching out to people for help to get to a greater level, a higher level of development of self, that's great. That's great. We all need to reach out to people to increase our value, to increase our mentality, to increase what it is whether it's spiritually, mentally, or financially. We have people that we can choose to be examples to show us how to get there, to show us how to do it. Now that's a whole different story, as I said, you know, because now if you reach out to someone who does something that you want to learn, they're teaching you how to fish. If you reach out to somebody just to give you something, then they're just giving you a fish, and the next day you'll be hungry. You know what I mean? They're just giving you something. You know, it's best to learn what it is that you can do because we all have skills. We all have a purpose. We all have something that shows who we are, shows our uniqueness. And that, whatever that is, whatever it may be, whether it's the way you talk, the way you walk, the way you sing, whatever it is, do your best to enhance that skill, enhance that special thing about you that makes you you, that makes you stand out from everybody else. Do your best to enhance that because that's what you've been given. That is your gift. And our time is running out. As I said, I thank you all for spending today with me. And hopefully, Jay Sean will be back with us next week. As I said, he had an important meeting that he had to attend, and I didn't want to not just to cancel the show. I wanted to at least come and see you guys and spend a little time with you guys, you know. And you know, the time is up now. I chose to do it for a half hour. I appreciate you all. I thank you. And until next week, I leave you all with peace. And thank you all for taking your time to spend your time with us. We'll see you next week. Cutting the show short because we only have half of the team, so we only doing half of the hour. Okay, to next week. Peace.